Star Wars fans have never been lacking in games set in that galaxy far, far away, and while that's not to say there haven't been some disappointments here and there, some of the most potentially interesting ones never even made it to market. Here's a look at some of the best Star Wars games that never were. Visceral's Star Wars game never even got a title, but the creative team behind it had fans in a frenzy of anticipation. Here was the studio behind Dead Space teaming up with Amy Hennig, the creative lead of the Uncharted series, to make a story-based action-adventure game set in the Star Wars universe. It sounded almost too good to be true, and in the end, it was. Electronic Arts shut down Visceral entirely and uprooted the game to its Vancouver studio, where it's being overhauled into another kind of game entirely. Bummer. The best thing about The Phantom Menace was Darth Maul, so it was a real drag that he didn't get to stick around for more than one movie. If Battle of the Sith Lords had ever come out, fans of the tattooed villain would at least have been able to play an entire game as the scariest Zabrak from this side of Dathomir. The plot was still up in the air at the time of the game's cancellation, but developer Red Fly Studios had put together a compelling prototype that showed fast-paced action perfectly suited to Darth Maul's double-edged lightsaber. But much like Darth Maul, its time was cut short. The original Star Wars Battlefront series got its start in 2004 with a shooter that let players fight in classic battles from the movies. The following year, a sequel came out to widespread acclaim, so it seemed inevitable that we'd get a third installment. But over the years, fans were left in a Sarlacc pit of despair as Battlefront 3 concept art and gameplay videos trickled out, but no announcement ever came, and it eventually became clear the game was cancelled. Thankfully, EA rebooted the franchise in 2015, giving fans another chance to experience those memorable battles at such an impressive scale.
May the Force be with us.
The Rogue Squadron series was alive and well in the early 2000s with 3 main installments and a spiritual successor in the form of Episode 1, Battle for Naboo. These games were all about high-flying combat during and around famous battles from the films. In 2003, developer Factor 5 began work on a sequel called Star Wars Dark Squadron, which would have followed the forces of the Galactic Empire to give players a look at the other side of the war. Unfortunately, LucasArts canceled Dark Squadron so Factor 5 could focus on a game centered around Chewbacca. Unfortunately, that was also canceled. You probably already knew this, but Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is a BioWare action RPG from 2003 that fans and critics adored. BioWare went on to make games like Jade Empire and Dragon Age, while Obsidian whipped up a sequel to KOTOR that received similar acclaim. This should have made Knights of the Old Republic 3 all but inevitable, especially in a franchise that's known for its trilogies. Alas, no Star Wars game is free from the threat of cancellation, and KOTOR 3 was no exception. Allegedly, market conditions had changed, and this threequel transformed into the MMORPG known as the Old Republic. Star Wars Attack Squadrons was to be a free-to-play browser game that let up to 16 players blast each other to smithereens in zero-G dogfights. Players could customize their spaceships and team up with friends across 3 game modes. Development was far enough along that it actually got a closed beta in 2014, but 4 months later, Disney Interactive blasted the whole project into oblivion. What went wrong with the game is unclear, but news of its cancellation came shortly after Disney laid off most of LucasArts' staff. Apparently, Disney had different plans for Star Wars games going forward, and Attack Squadrons didn't fit the bill.
Catch a deep breath. It'll be the last fresh air you'll get for a while.
A similar fate awaited Star Wars 1313, a LucasArts game that seemed to be deep in development when Disney pulled the plug in 2013. Star Wars fans were crushed, and for good reason. The game had been announced at E3 the year before with a trailer that generated loads of buzz. Star Wars 1313 was going to be a shooter that followed a young Boba Fett bounty hunting in the criminal underworld of Coruscant. But just like Attack Squadrons, 1313 was disintegrated. As much as some people love the idea of a Boba Fett game, Disney wasn't having it.
Bounty hunters. We don't need that scum.
Yes, sir.
Those are our picks for the best Star Wars games that never were. Which ones were you looking forward to the most? Let us know, and for a whole mess of other games that did come out, set your coordinates for our in-depth look at every Star Wars game ever.